afternoon. I'll try and foster some energy in myself and you guys. Alright, I'm presenting this one on behalf of my role, which is part-time at the CRC at the moment, where I'm tasked with trying to bridge the gap between all the research the CRC is doing and you guys in industry, and particularly doing that translation through what we can highlight as case studies and what we can get going as demonstration projects where we can get that research on the ground. So, we all know, and Brian, he talked about it yesterday, I hope you enjoyed our keynote, the transition that we're on a path towards water-sensitive cities. You could say that Victoria was a shining light in that pathway for water-sensitive urban design, and ask the question, are we going to lead the way for water-sensitive cities as well? So I want to try and unpack that a little bit and see, are we making progress on that pathway towards water-sensitive cities? This is a curve that I've found useful in kind of understanding where we're at. It's with any innovation that comes along. You have the innovators at the front, early adopters, and then you get into the mainstream, and the laggards are always going to fight kicking and streaming along the back end until you finally get there. And the kind of curves that Bryony was talking about, I guess you're fighting against this full range of people. Out of interest, where do you put yourself on that curve? I presume we don't have any laggards in the room, or you probably wouldn't be here. But is there anyone who considers themselves in the middle of the pack? Are you just kind of coming across this stuff? Yeah? Great. I think that's where we need to be, this kind of conference that we're getting more people like that along. So I guess the rest of you are putting yourself at the front end, which is fine, and I think that's probably true, that we're in our little club, in our little niche. We're forging ahead, and we probably don't look back very often to see whether anyone's actually following us, but you know, it's interesting. We're carrying on. So let's unpack, I guess, water-sensitive cities, where we are. So we've been through the stormwater journey. I guess water-sensitive urban design, we feel like we're kind of at the end of that. We're probably dealing with the laggards at the moment. But with water-sensitive cities, we're probably more at the front end of that curve, because we've got so much more to deal with. We've got all of these different types of water that we have to integrate, and then there's all of those benefits that we're trying to deliver. But the problem with all those benefits is they touch so many people that there's so much to integrate. So the challenge for us, I guess, is the 3 C's. We're trying to connect the water cycle, we're trying to collaborate with others, and we're trying to create great places to create that idea of a water-sensitive city. And I guess the challenge for us is to make sure that we're collaborating with the laggards in the mainstream at the same time to bring us all on the same journey before we get too far ahead. And for the CRC in particular, obviously we were forging forward into new research. It's kind of how much of a leap do we have to take back to actually educate the mainstream and the laggards that are following us along before we jump too far ahead. And sometimes there can be a bit of a gap there. So before I go on, I want to tell you a little story, I guess, about my past career. I worked in the UK for 8 years, where I told everyone about this wonderful place called Australia, where water-sensitive urban design was all the rage, perfect. You know, I came out here, and I distinctly remember 2009, came to Melbourne Water-Sensitive Cities Conference, and I actually asked the audience, rated out of 10, how well are we doing with water-sensitive urban design? And the answer was 8 out of 10. That's pretty fantastic, particularly in a British context where no one's going to give anything more than a 5. So we're like, wow, you guys must really be loving it. You know, I did a lot of work in the UK to promote what water-sensitive cities were, water-sensitive urban design, and said, this is what Australia looks like. Looks amazing. Look at all these great case studies. They all look brilliant. And of course, then I moved here and couldn't wait to see all of these things in action. Turned up to the Docklands, and this is what my photo looked like. I was so disappointed. It wasn't like the brochure. Someone had fooled me. Went to another site. That was my photo I was showing in the UK. This is what it looked like. The vegetation was dead. But that's just one side. And I guess my point here is that we've got to have those case studies behind water-sensitive cities that stand the test of time. These are the show ponies of water-sensitive urban design, which maybe didn't turn out so well for various reasons, but there are plenty out there that did. So picking the winners on this journey and making sure that we have confidence that they're not just the brochure type is going to be really important for water-sensitive cities for the future to convince people that it's actually happening. So what are these great point 2 projects out there? When I started to work with CRC, I asked a few people, and they kind of struggled a little bit. They're like, oh, Lynbrook. I'm like, well, that's 10, 15 years old. Come on, what's the next one? So I thought, let's do a survey. So we asked the country. So a nationwide survey came out the end of last year. It ran for a couple of months. It was an iPad on offer. We got it out through all the channels we could. Probably went to all of you guys in the special niche, but we also tried to get it out to the mainstream through Planning Association, Landscape Institute, all that kind of thing. And we had 170 respondents, which for an academic survey is pretty good. And which people did we touch? So we had a lot of consultants, which is great because consultants get around and they know a lot of projects out there. Had a lot of local government, but also state government. We had water utilities, which was great because they're an important part of the picture. And a few developers and contractors, but less in that field. And that's probably because water-sensitive cities was in the title. It is more in that policy space than it is necessarily on the ground. I think that's reflective of where we are on that curve. We haven't quite punched the mainstream yet. And who got the award for the most enthusiastic state? It was us, Victoria, had the most respondents, so well done. Followed closely by WA, those guys are really getting enthusiastic, and Queensland. But New South Wales still really struggling along with South Australia. So what else did it tell us? Of the people that responded, that we asked what aspects of water-sensitive city do you commonly influence in your work? No surprises really that most people came from stormwater management background. It's still very much the angle that it's coming in on. I think we need to do a little bit to shape that and get some broader people involved. But it was heartening to see that, pretty good spread across the board in terms of what people are touching. So they're touching policy, but right through to delivery, getting involved in recycled water as well, potable water supply, flood management, groundwater, all kinds of things. So that tells us that there are the champions out there across the board, and that's pretty much coherent with what Brian was experiencing. We've got the core factors in place. What we need to do now is capitalise on that enabling environment. So what I was most interested in, I guess, is what does you guys want out of case studies if the CRC does some? And this was quite a surprising, I guess, result. The most common reason people said they wanted case studies was to demonstrate technical viability. And to me, that's saying we don't quite believe it works yet. Or the people we're trying to convince don't quite believe it works. So that's, I guess, the people at the front of the curve need the ammunition, need the point 2 project to say, look, you guys in the mainstream, this stuff really stacks up, it's out there, and they really want to build that general confidence in water-sensitive cities concepts. So we're really at the front of the innovation still. And it was important that case studies had a positive message. There's lessons to learn, there's things will fail, but we felt we were still in that phase where we needed to really shout about it and really get those case studies out there that showed general confidence. There was a second group which were really interested in the nitty-gritty. I think these are probably the doers amongst us. They really wanted some hard facts to get to the next level of details and more than just a pretty picture and a nice demonstration of a project. They wanted some hard facts and figures to go to their managers and say, look, this stacks up, we've got the benefits all monetized. They wanted that evidence, and they wanted rigorous data analysis. So I see those as a slightly more involved group. And the third one was really probably at the very front of the design curve, where they're after inspiration. They want new stuff. They're not interested in the stuff that was last year. It's probably what we're all here for. We want to hear the next big thing. But it's important that we can't just create case studies for you guys, because we're leaving the mainstream behind. We still need to take them along with the journey. So what we're focusing on now, I guess, is not just delivering one type of case study, being a bit more sophisticated about it, to particularly focus on these groups that need different things. So there'll be a set of case studies that CRC will develop, which are show me how it works, the proofs in the pudding kind of thing, the ones that give the kind of rigorous details about monetized benefits and all that kind of stuff for those who love to dive into the detail. And those really wacky concepts that may not have even been built yet, but are going to inspire the ones to keep going, that are at the front of the curve. So if we map those against Bryony's journey, we'll find that we're actually dealing with different parts of the curve there, and we've got to be conscious of that. So we've got the show me how it works, people who are still battling against, why do we even need water-sensitive cities? Do they work? Are they a load of rubbish? We've got those who are a bit further up the curve, who are really interested in the nitty-gritty and fostering that shared understanding. And then we've got those who've already made the leap, who are just looking for the next shiny new thing, the magpies. So what else? We asked people, how did you find out about case studies of great projects that you do point to? And the top answer was places like this. So conferences, this is how we learn nowadays. In a technology-driven world where we've only got 2 seconds to spend reading something at a time, or our attention span is the size of a tweet. When we lock ourselves in the room to hear something is probably when we learn the most. So that's something to learn from, and it's something we're very much taking on board in terms of how we write case studies, because we're conscious that you probably won't read them. But there was a strong nod to case studies available on capacity building websites like Clearwater's. I guess the difference with CRC is that we'll be nationwide, and we'll try and pinpoint those ones that are maybe missing from the current portfolios. And an interesting one, which I think was a bit of a lie in the respondents, this one, 37% just said direct involvement was the way that they learned. And the reason I think it was a bit of a lie was because we also asked people to suggest which projects out there do you think are really good. And if you track back the projects suggested to who suggested them, everyone suggested their own projects. That's because obviously we learn the most from what we're involved in. And we like to think that we're innovators. We like to think that we're doing things that no one else are. So we're the best, obviously learn from me. But I don't know, take a few seconds to think about it. When was the last time you went out of your way to learn about somebody else's project? Aside from it being presented at you at a conference, did you try and look something up? Did you really try and delve into any detail? Did you go out and ask people? It's really that one-to-one learning that most of it occurs. And fair enough, that's how we learn. We like to apply things ourselves. So, I mean, to us that means we need to find ways of involving more people. I think it's dangerous for us to, as a niche, to just carry on by ourselves. How can we create projects that bring more and new people in, rather than just running along at a great pace to interesting things by ourselves? So as part of it, that we asked for projects out there, and we got over 200 projects suggested. Most of them also came from Victoria. And what were they? These are what people highlighted as the great Victorian projects out there, and there's only some of them I've listed there. Lynbrook's still making an appearance, but some other great ones, Little Stringbark Creek, Fisherman's Bend, Melbourne Airport, Greening the Pipeline, a lot of the ones that we've heard about at this conference. Calcalla's still in there, Yarra Park, Greening the West. You know, if we think about it, there's a lot going on. And I guess I just encourage us as an industry to not forget about the ones that maybe are 2 years old and old news to us. Let's make sure that we're still sharing those learnings with the broader industry before we move on to the next shiny, attractive thing. So while I've got you here, I'm just going to take you through a few little other snippets of case studies around Australia that did come up to make you aware of what else is going on. It's worth giving a nod to Royal Park that did come up again and again as one of the iconic projects for Melbourne, and this is definitely one that I used a lot in the UK to demonstrate, and I'm glad to see that it's still chugging along. So there's oldies but goodies out there that we should keep celebrating. But some of the new shiny things in Victoria, Aquarivo got a lot of nods. So if you're not familiar with it, it's Southeast Water's baby development. It's technically an infill project, but it was an old water treatment site. It's being developed at the moment, and they've put a lot of effort into really putting a bit of everything in there. So impressive water reduction statistics, 60 to 70% reduction is what they expect in the average household. So they're doing that several ways. So they've got a recycled water supply as well as rainwater tanks. So they really experimented with how you can have both in combination. And the way they've done that is by having rainwater tanks supply to hot water, which wasn't suitable for recycled water. They've also got torque tank technology in there, which means that they can see rainstorms coming and tell the rainwater tank to empty so that they can then fill up. And that helps with obviously providing capacity within the drainage system and preventing local flooding. It's also very high-tech in terms of monitoring the sewers and the rainwater tanks through the one-box system. So the householder gets a live feed as well as Southeast Water of what's going on with the water systems on lot. And because everything's kind of on-lot based, it didn't really have a big impact on the urban design. So from council's point of view, it was fairly straightforward. It's very much a lot level response. So that's one to keep an eye out, and there will be a case study coming out shortly from the CRC on that one. You can see here it's fully part of the promotional material that's available to buyers. Good news is that they're sold like hotcakes. How much that's down to the environmental initiatives as opposed to the location is debatable. The developer, Villawood, would tell you location was one, but environmental was a close second. So people were interested in it, and they really liked the energy and the water initiatives on site. But there are a lot of pipes, so you've got a lot of pipes going in and out for different sources combined. So it'll be really interesting to see how this is delivered on the ground. Another oldie but a goodie in Brisbane. So Broadwater Parklands in Queensland. Again, that one on the left was a promotional brochure image I used in the UK, and it still looks fairly similar. I think they've had a few issues with their mangrove environment, but generally the wetlands had some work done to it and it's surviving okay, so still looking pretty good. And the rain gardens, again, brochure on the left, and the reality nowadays on the right, still looking great in terms of the rain garden up there. Take a little segue over to White Gum Valley in Western Australia. This is another case study that's coming out, again at a precinct scale, where they took a lot of initiatives on board, and a lot of this was down to the tenacity of the consultant and the local council and the water corporation working together really to push the boundaries on this site. So again, reducing potable water use by 70%. They've got a combination of supplies as well. They've got rainwater tanks for indoor use and groundwater kind of in a managed aquifer situation as it is in Western Australia. And I've got that for public and private irrigation use. So that was, it's worth noting that the council operates their local distribution network for that irrigation supply to private households. So in Victoria, that's been a bit of a, all right then, we're shutting down.
The computer's turned itself off, did it?
Yeah. No worries, Andrew. I'll carry on talking.
Yeah, I was checking until it was.
Maybe it's running out of battery.
That should be plugged in. Just keep going on.
Yeah, so whereas we've had a lot of trouble, I guess, in Victoria with the legislation to do with supplying alternative sources beyond boundaries, they managed to segment that in WA, which I think is quite an interesting lesson because it was so small scale. I guess it was maybe 50 units they were supplying to. They got a permission from the local water authority to waive that legislation, and therefore the council is operating as directly supplying water to the front yards, so that they're playing the role of a water utility, which will be an interesting case study to learn from. It's updating. Yeah, great.
Automatic updates, gotta love that.
I would show you some fantastic pictures. The other great thing they did, if anyone's ever lived in Western Australia, you'll know that they have these huge things they call sumps, where effectively they direct all of the stormwater to a fenced-off patch of rubbish, where effectively it pools and then sinks into the ground. Which in urban space terms is a horrible effect, and they're living all over the suburbs. But they managed to get investment from a whole bunch of local stakeholders and convince the council to redo one of those sumps, which is right next to the site, and turn it into a park. So they put all the storage requirement underneath and created an urban park on top, which is a fantastic outcome for that case study. So it doesn't look like that's going to finish anytime soon.
No.
But I'm near the end anyway. So just to highlight, I guess, that there are those case studies coming out. Keep an eye out for them. We're also going to develop a selection of very short and sharp case studies from all of those 200 projects that you suggested. We'll take skim off the top of those and really start mapping out around Australia where we're at in terms of water-sensitive cities. Obviously, I'm only around for 6 weeks or so in this role, but my colleague Kim Markwell will be taking off over from Brisbane, so please get in touch with her if you'd like to suggest any projects or demonstration projects. Otherwise, I was just going to end with a little bit of a poll. Since I did this in 2009, if we had to mark ourselves out of 10, anyone want to offer a figure of how far we've got or how well we're doing in terms of water-sensitive cities progress? Is Australia still that shining light? Are we feeling positive? Give me a number.
I reckon 6.5.
6.5 good, yeah. I think
7.5. Australia or Victoria?
Oh, let's go with Victoria. We can only judge by Victoria, I guess.
if you mean in terms of how far we've got, I think it's 6.5. But in terms of
how well done.
how we're doing, I think it's 7 or an 8, because this process of bringing what is an innovative concept into fruition, the kind of challenges we're facing here don't seem to be anything different to what they did when they first brought in sewage 100 years ago and other things.
Yeah.
So it's not bad.
Yeah. All right, let's settle on 7. We're checking in again in a couple of years.
Yeah.
All right, and generally, I mean, if anyone has any comments in terms of great projects they think should be the shining lights for Victoria water-sensitive cities, please share them now or get in touch as well.
Has anyone got any questions? I think it's time to jump in. Anyone?
Yeah, going right back to the start, Celeste, you were talking about like are we leaders, are we the middle of the road, or we've been dragged along. And I think as engineers and scientists, we're fairly conservative. And the nature of, say, we work in a water authority, so we're dealing with potable drinking water.
Sure.
The very nature of what we do has to be conservative. Like mining industries will go out in the middle of nowhere, test something, If it fails, they just dig a hole and bury it, nobody knows. But if we stuff up, we could kill people. So that very conservative nature of engineers, local authorities, councils, sometimes can be a big drawback to us as well.
Yeah, well, it's like in Bryony's talk, she's saying that it's not a bad place to be, that those people play an important role in questioning along the way, and we have to be able to answer those questions, otherwise it may not be valid to move ahead in the path we're going in. So yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing, or you should be in one part of the curve or another. It's just a challenge for those innovators that they need to keep talking to the mainstream to justify the pathway ahead.
Any more questions?
You've spoken a lot about Australia there. What about, especially about when you're in London, how you saw Australia as the shining light at that point? Do you have any update, reflection on that?
No, I think Australia is still probably the pick of the bunch that I'm aware of. Obviously, there's a lot more going on in Asia nowadays.
Singapore's pretty...
Yeah, definitely. And I guess in the Middle East, where you've got particular water pressures, they may be ahead in some areas, but not in the whole kind of vision. I mean, and it's great to have the CRC based in Australia, which is really focused on this, and I think there's a lot of respect internationally from that. UK, unfortunately, hasn't moved since I left in terms of where they're at. They're still struggling along the water-sensitive urban design path, what they call SUDs, and really they haven't managed to get it into legislation, which is the key thing which Victoria did, which is the reason I think we're ahead in that space. And until you do that, it becomes such a struggle just to make it a voluntary activity.
Would you say that's because we value water? We're a country that has droughts regularly. We're going to non-drought, but we have drought again, and water does play a really essential role in our lifestyle. Most people live on the bay or the ocean. So that's the cultural differences of why this has been embraced here so much more.
I think I thought about it a lot when I was in the UK, because there's a distinct difference in the culture of the people, I think, as well, not just the role of water. Australians are famous for having a go in a way, and the British are naturally conservative, you could say, and I think that made a big difference in that a lot of the early WSUD projects, it involved taking a leap of faith to get them in the ground, kind of underwriting them and being willing to pay for them if they went wrong. And I think, that thirst for innovation and trying something new is something that is quite unique to Australia.
One more, I think we've got time for you.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether you have any comments on why you think they're not sort of moving forward in the space in New South Wales as much as they are.
Again, I'd say it's a legislative one. They still, to put WSUD in, it's kind of tied up in all the sustainability standards around basics and things. It becomes voluntary, and therefore it's kind of down to developers whether they want to make it a showcase development or not. So it's not really hitting that mainstream. So yeah, I think you need a little bit of the stick as well as the carrot to get it there. New South Wales just seems to be its own beast.
Well, I worked in New South Wales when I first started looking at this, or started being involved in this industry, and it was down to regional plans, whereas I think clause 56, the VPP, applies across the state. But in New South Wales, it's more patchy. And so that's one of the big differences I've noticed, and has a big impact. I don't know what's going on. But look, can everyone just join in and thank Celeste, especially